Good morning. Welcome to Frank's School. Maybe a black cat will help me today. I just turned 70 today. Today's my 70th birthday. I don't care too much about birthdays, but it seemed like, well, that might be a way that I could remember when I start this. Aller Anfang sind schwer, they say in German. All beginnings are, or every beginning is heavy, is difficult, and I'm beginning something. I'm going to begin to talk about a movie called Resurrection. Resurrection, the movie. And today, I want to deal with Raison d'être, the reason that it exists. Actually, I'm not sure it will ever exist. It probably won't ever exist, but I'm going to describe it anyway. It's a movie that I imagine. And I'm going to take as long as it requires to do it. I have no idea. I may be at this for weeks, well, weeks for sure, months maybe, as I describe this movie that does not exist, but I sort of wish it were there. I have, there are so many issues that people deal with, and they're at the forefront. And I with social media, maybe especially for me now, because of my former students, I'm in contact with a lot of people, and there's that matter of gun love, the way certain Americans love their guns, and the rest of the world doesn't understand that, and the violence that goes with it. I mean, the video games that children play that are continually blasting things up and blowing things up, that seems like what it's all about, it seems to me. The matter of climate change, that so many people, they don't believe it, or they don't want to believe it, or more importantly, they don't know what to do about it. I think about that movie, An Inconvenient Truth, I think was the name of it. There was a movie. I'm not sure how effective that actually was. There's the matter of the USA and its hegemony, the way it wants to be the policeman for the world, or is tending to be so, along with its militarism. What is it? The U.S. military spends more than the 7 or 8 other closest countries all put together. There's that, and you can be on either side of these issues, I suppose. Materialism, people wanting so much. Jobs, lack of jobs. You never hear about too many jobs. Well, not really, but you mostly hear lack of jobs. These are issues. I'm listing issues that are there, and they're important issues. The refugees in Europe, an enormous problem, in many ways brought on by USA hegemony and materialism and militarism and centralization, certainly. That's the term that I tend to use. Anyway, the list could go on. I say etc. And people get on these and they argue. I see so much of it online. I get involved in the arguments myself, back and forth. But it just is not going to do it. You can't be you can be anti-gun love, or you can be anti the things that are making climate change, but it's not going to be enough for me, I have felt. I also think politicians cannot solve these problems. Politicians use words. Politicians largely have to be elected. They have to convince people, and they're very good with words. But I think what is required really is a shift in paradigm. How do you shift a whole way of thinking, a whole way of organizing your thought, a paradigm shift? That kind of thing doesn't happen too often. I thought about looking back at the time, 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 years ago, when the paradigm shift happened, I believe, from matriarchal societies to patriarchal societies. That was a huge paradigm shift. And what was it? There was another one. And a recent level there in the 1960s, there was a sort of a paradigm shift. And anyway, I have, in despair, I've often said many times that that's going to take poets, not politicians, but poets, songwriters, filmmakers, TV show producers, video game creators. It will take their work to shift a whole paradigm. And I think about the 60s again. The songwriters were so important in the 60s. These kind of go together. Advertisers, I put it there because I think they're disqualified automatically by definition from the job I see as necessary, is because they are by definition about the money. And that's not going to be the driving force. So although they are, in a sense, you could say the poets of today and the songwriters of today are the advertisers. That's a tricky business. But anyway, I have said that often, and I said, where are they? We need them, these poets, these songwriters, to inspire people, to get them to shift their thinking. Where are they? And I finally, one day, sort of got ashamed of myself. And I thought, I'm 70 years old today. I can't just wait and wait and wait until they appear. So I need to try. Now, I have been a poet to some extent. I've given poetry a shot, and the little bit that I've produced, I'm fairly proud of, but nobody knows about it. I've never been a songwriter, and I don't think I can be. And filmmaking, I never dreamed of filmmaking, you know. I don't even watch that many movies. I've never played a single video game in my life, I don't think, so I'm so disqualified. And yet, I got ashamed of myself. I thought, you can't just keep saying that, Frank. You need to actually try to act. In some ways, I think about Moses. When Moses was told that he had to do this stuff, and Moses had a speech impediment or something, and he said, "You got the wrong guy." Well, I'm the wrong guy for this, but I'm ashamed. And so I'm going to give it a shot. I began to think about a movie that I wanted to see. I wanted to see a movie like a certain movie. I didn't want to make it. I wanted to see it. But I had a little hope of that. And I could say that this happened on a particular afternoon. It was a very strenuous day in Portugal. In the company of the Hawklings, we had found the National Museum of Ethnology. And this is a story which I have in my course. I talked about it in the course that whole day. But as a result of that day, I found out about a man named João Mário Grilo, and he had made a movie called O Fim do Mundo. That translates to The End of the World. 1992, not to be confused with a more modern movie. Now, I still have not seen the movie. I don't know when I'll ever be able to see the movie. It seems to be impossible to see. It was not a famous movie, and it was never released in the United States. I just saw the trailer of it. But O Fim do Mundo, it has to do with the villages in Portugal that have gradually become abandoned. And I don't actually even know too much of the story of it. But that day that I found out about that, I began to think, the movie is necessary, or I feel it's necessary, and I began to think, can I come up with a movie? I'd heard of something called a screenplay. Well, yeah, screenplay. A movie starts with a screenplay, doesn't it? I actually talked to a friend of mine who taught film at the high school level for a while, and he had a few things to say. I talked to my nephew who studied film in Pittsburgh, and he had a few things to say. He himself is working on a screenplay of his own. I asked, I think it was the guy who taught, I said, what about a storyboard? What's a storyboard? And don't you have to be an artist in order to make a film? If you're going to make a storyboard, you've got to be able to draw. Doesn't that disqualify everybody, including me? I can't draw. And he said, no, sometimes they don't use storyboards. Well, in any case, I cannot draw. That has not changed. And yet I am going to begin to tell the story of this movie called Raison. I didn't even know what kind of a name would it have, and that's not necessarily going to be the name. I just decided I got to come up with some kind of a name. So there it is, Resurrection. But the one thing I'm sure of is that, and it's going to make this movie different from any one I've ever seen before, is it will be wordless. There are going to be no words spoken in this entire movie, the way I imagine it. That doesn't mean it's a silent movie. No, because in silent movies they had words on the screen. And I'll say more about that. I mean, it will be full of sound, just no words. Well, I've begun. And as I say, aller Anfang ist schwer. The beginning has occurred. I'm now 70 years old. Maybe by the time I'm 80, I'll be done with this. Bye for now.